conspiracy or an out-of-this-world visit, here are 10 people who mysteriously passed after UFO interactions. Before we start, show us some love by hitting that subscribe button. João Prestes Filho. In a small village near Araçariguama, Brazil, in March 1946, João Prestes Filho had been returning home from a fishing trip when he claimed he saw a strange aircraft flying overhead. The UFO shot out a beam that struck João in the leg. Several hours later, after returning home, João's leg had gotten worse to the point where the flesh was falling off the bone and he had fallen very ill. By the time he arrived at the hospital for help, the man was already dead. Thomas F. Mantell. Thomas F. Mantell was a 25-year-old military pilot who met his demise on January 7, 1948, after his plane spun out and crashed. Before that, the Kentucky State Police had gotten calls about a UFO flying west over Maysville, Kentucky. The police called the military, who responded with 4 F-1 Mustangs. The planes climbed up into the air to get a closer look, but at 22,000 feet, 3 of the planes dropped out. Only Mantell was still climbing. When he reached 30,000 feet, the last thing he said was, "My God, I see people in this thing," before spinning out and crashing to his death. While the government tried to cover up its tracks by saying it was a weather balloon, it still doesn't explain Mantell's last transmission. Carl Hunrath and Wilbur Wilkinson. Carl Hunrath and Wilbur Wilkinson were UFO investigators who rented a plane in November 1953 so that they could meet aliens who had contacted them personally. They took off from the Gardena County Airport in California and were heading to a remote part of the Golden State Desert for the meeting. However, after taking off, the men were never seen nor heard from again. There was no wreckage or even any bodies. There is also a theory that the FBI was investigating Hunrath because he apparently invented something that could make any military plane fall from the sky. The question is it aliens or government conspiracy? Jonathan Lovett. In March 1956, near the Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, Sergeant Jonathan Lovett and Major William Cunningham were looking for debris from a missile test. Lovett made his way over a dune, and Cunningham heard him scream. When Cunningham looked up, he claimed he saw a silver disc-shaped saucer hovering 15 to 20 feet above Lovett, where a snake-like creature wrapped itself around him and took him up to the ship. Cunningham called for help, but officials believed he actually murdered Lovett and hid the body. But 3 days later, Lovett's body was found and it was mutilated. His eyes were removed, his body was drained of blood, the tongue was removed through the jaw, and his anus was cored out. Rivelino Mafra da Silva. In Diamantina, Brazil, in August of 1962, Rivelino Mafra da Silva and his sons were awoken by the sound of heavy footsteps around their house. When they looked out of their windows, they saw human-like shadows surrounding the home, as well as 2 black spheres that floated off the ground. When Rivelino went outside to investigate, the 2 spheres merged into one and released a yellow smoke. As the smoke surrounded Rivelino, he completely vanished. Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana. On August 17, 1966, in Campos dos Goitacazes, Brazil, 2 engineers named Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana left their home to get supplies for work. Just hours later, they were spotted in Niterói, where they bought waterproof coats and bottled water. 3 days later, a man flying his kite in the mountains spotted Manuel and Miguel's dead bodies. Around the time of their death, a UFO had been spotted. When police managed to get to the bodies, they were shocked to see the men were wearing the waterproof coats, lead masks over their eyes, and wearing suits. A note was found with the pair saying, 1630, be at the agreed place. 1830, swallow capsules. After effect, protect metals. Wait for signal. Mask. The men's insides were deteriorated to the point where cause of death couldn't be concluded. Arcesio Bermudez. In July 1969, in Analima, Colombia, 54-year-old Arcesio Bermudez heard his children scream and rushed outside to see what was wrong. To his shock, there was a large glowing object in the sky. The UFO moved to the top of a nearby hillside where Arcesio went to investigate further. He returned a short time later looking terrified, saying that he saw a creature in a glass dome on top of the UFO. When he shined his flashlight on the UFO, it shined a bright light before taking off. Less than 48 hours later, Arcesio complained of nausea and blue spots on his skin. A week after the incident, Arcesio was dead. On paper, his cause of death was gastroenteritis. Abel Boro. In October 1981, in Panorama, Brazil, Abel Boro and his friend Rivamar Ferreira spotted a UFO in the sky with lights so bright it made the night seem like day, and it was spinning around itself. The object descended itself upon Boro and overtook his body in a white, glittering light. Ferreira ran to Boro's hometown for help. When they returned, Boro was dead. His skin was white and his body had been drained of its blood. Mutilated man. In 1988, the mutilated body of an identified man was found in the Guarapiranga Reservoir in Brazil. There was no sign of a struggle, which is incredible because the man's lips, eyes, tongue, and ears had been removed, and the body was drained of tissue and muscle. There were also 1.5-inch round holes cut out of the body. His genitals had also been mutilated, and like Jonathan Lovett, the anus had been cored out. Usually, mutilations like this have only been found in animals, and when that happened, UFOs and aliens were to blame. By the time the man was discovered, he had already been dead for 2 to 3 days, but there was no smell and no decaying. Todd Sees. In August 2002, near the Montour Ridge by Northumberland, Pennsylvania, Todd Sees had been driving his all-terrain vehicle so that he could assess the deer population for hunting season. However, when Sees didn't come home that night, his family got worried, especially after finding Sees' car with his clothes neatly folded. Meanwhile, people were reporting strange sightings of a silver disc near Montour Ridge. After a 2-day search, Sees was found, but he was dead and his body was emaciated.